when you're on the phone with Lee Corso and you see Desmond Howard's name pop up. And I'm like, oh God, I can't have Desmond Howard go to voicemail.
That's right.
But I can't tell Lee Corso, hey, can you hold on for a minute?
Yeah.
Those are the pleasant problems that you had.
Yeah. This week on the pod, we welcome longtime collegiate communications professional Mark Cohen, who spent over 36 years working in the business, with all of his time spent at two places, Wofford College and TCU. Cohen started his full-time career as a young Division II SID in 1989 at Wofford, with his efforts eventually leading to spearheading the football communications effort for TCU and their national championship run in 2022.
But I remember standing on the sidelines pregame, the CFP semifinal year or game when we beat Michigan, and then again in the championship game against Georgia in LA, just standing on the sidelines pregame, just like, my God, I've come a long way from the Ditto machine breaking on me in 1989.
But Mark, like way too many others in the industry, saw his career come to a close in a cold-hearted 4-minute encounter in his initial meeting with his new athletic director with no real reason given.
Looking back on it, like I mentioned, my first and only one-on-one, was my termination meeting. It would have been nice. You had a chance to maybe, I don't want to say defend yourself, but at least, get to know you better and the impact that you've had on so many people.
In a lesson for all of us, Mark has taken his abrupt departure in stride, that sometimes things like this happen, and it's up to us to make the most of it. That attitude has endeared him to many in the business and with the people he worked with, a fact that is reflected by the amount of text messages still on his phone and directed towards him on social media.
And Sonny, he said, man, I'm just glad that you get to see the impact you had on people.
That's awesome.
The love that you're getting on social media, whether it's Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook. Right. I mean, just because I'm glad you get to see it. Normally that happens when you die.
This is the true story of two washed-up sports guys who chased the dream, private flights, championship rings, running sideline to sideline on per diem and adrenaline.
We gave our 20s and our 30s to the industry, pulled off miracles that were never in the job description. In return, low pay, long hours, and we still got cut from the team.
This is about what really happens behind the badge. The burnout, the bad bosses, the dream job that didn't love you back, but also the lifelong friendships, the chaos, the holy shit stories you couldn't make up. And somehow, despite everything, you'd still do parts of it all over again.
This is one for the ones who lived it, loved it, hated it, and still kind of miss it. For everyone who's ever asked, how in the hell did we survive that? We're two former sports insiders with more than 40 years of experience and more than enough scars to make fun of it all.
And just enough trauma to start a podcast instead of going to therapy.
I'm Brandon Barca.
And I'm Andy Boggs.
And this is No Longer Credentialed. We once had access, now we have opinions.
So I remember driving out to South Carolina. I had a 1980 Ford Fairmont with an 8-track tape player, and the car wasn't in the best of shape. So I had to drive at night, I think because it was cooler. I was afraid the car would overheat in the daytime. And I got somewhere to Mississippi. It was around 3 a.m. and I made a U-turn. I said, what am I doing? I'm going to take a Division II job at a school I never heard of? I can't do this and live in South Carolina. I mean, I'm a Southern California, Orange County guy, lived in Houston. I'm going to Spartanburg, South Carolina. So I just made a U-turn and started driving back to California at 3 a.m. in the middle of Mississippi. And I got several exits down the road. I'm like, I don't have a job in California. What am I going to do? So I made another U-turn and then went back over to South Carolina and decided to take the job. And, I got there the same week as Mike Young, who's now the head basketball coach at Virginia Tech.
Right.
And so that was the first year Wofford was D2 after moving up from NAIA. And both Mike and I are like, yeah, we're going to be here for 1 year, and then we're out of here.
He was there a long time too.
Absolutely.
A long time.
The school, it was just phenomenal. Unbelievable place, how great Wofford is. And so eventually we went Division I, FCS, joined the Southern Conference, I stayed 16 years. Mike stayed, I think it was 29 by the time he
Yeah.
left. But I was there after, I think it was his 13th year, maybe, or 12th year, somewhere in there, he got promoted from assistant coach to the head coach. But it just
And the
shows
rest
you,
is history, right?
yeah. I mean, two guys that got hired the same week. One stayed 16, one stayed 29.
But that's
And then,
what you did, though. Like I don't know if it still happens, and we can speak to that. But I mean, I took a job. I had no idea anybody there. Moved 500 miles away from home, made no money, but it was like the best 4 or 5 years of my life. It was so fun, and I think that's just what you did. You just left.
yeah, and Wofford was terrific. I never thought I'd leave Wofford. I thought I was going to be there forever. And then Danny Morrison, who hired me at Wofford, eventually he became the Southern Conference commissioner. Then he went to TCU as the AD. And so I remember, when Danny got the job, Danny is my mentor. I thought, it'd be kind of nice to work for Danny again. And so I expressed interest in the TCU opening. And Danny was big on perception. And he said, well, I'd love to hire you. I know you can do the job. But the thing is, if I hire you as my first hire, everybody's going to think, here comes the whole Wofford invasion to TCU. He goes, I just can't have my first hire be a guy from Wofford, where I came from. If I'd been here for several years, situated, it's different. I just can't do it. I think the timing is just not right. And then about a month later, Danny called me back up and goes, okay,
when can you get here?
And next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Fort Worth. And then Danny, offered me the job. And it was one of those low pressure deals. When I came out for the interview, I mean, I loved where I was at. I mean, Wofford was just so special, such a great place. But, when I walked on the campus at TCU and just the opportunity to work for Danny again, I was just like, you know what? This is, I think, the right situation. I think it'd be great for the family, at that point to come to Fort Worth.
So we all have a story about how we got into the business. Can you just kind of tell us about yours? Like what got you started?
I never knew you could work in athletics or sports until I was a junior year in college. I had no idea all I cared about was sports. And I remember my high school guidance counselors like, well, you can make a lot of money in business, especially economics. That'd be a good major for you. Okay. So I became a business major at Cal State Fullerton, and I'd go to business classes with my sweats with an LA Times sports page. And everybody else had like a blazer and slacks and the Wall Street Journal. And I was just kind of looking around like, man, this really isn't my crowd. I just don't know. I just don't like this. I'm just taking classes, but not really having fun with it. And then I remember walking out of a class one time with a friend of mine, and I asked her what she was doing for the summer. And she goes, I'm going to intern in the sports information office. And I said, what is that? Is that like racquetball court reservations and her murals? Like, what is sports information? And she described it. She said, it's all the publicity, promotion of the teams, the student athletes, the coaches, every sport. I'm like, where in the world is this place? And she said, it's right in the back of Titan Gym. I'm not sure if you've ever been to Titan Gym, the mecca of West Coast hoops.
I have not.
It looks the same as it did when I was in school. I mean, it's a unique place.
Yeah.
And so I found where the place was on the back of the gym, small little office in between the volleyball and baseball coach offices. And as soon as I walked in, all I saw was media guides, posters, schedule cards, All America flyers. The whole thing was just nothing but Cal State Fullerton sports everywhere. And I remember that moment of just like, oh my God, I think I have found where I need to be.
The honey hole.
The very next day, I changed my major. I said, get me out of this business and economics. I want to do this for my career. And so I switched to communications, emphasis on PR. Then I had enough classes already to get a business minor. And I just engrossed myself in the job. It was the coolest thing. And then after my junior year, that first year, they put me in charge of baseball. And, Cal State Fullerton's got, a great history in baseball, known for baseball and Kevin Costner and Gwen Stefani for one semester. So I just started working with the baseball team. and, just helping in the office, working. Back then we had football, men's basketball. I mean, I just did everything in the office. And I was like, wow, if I found my place where I want to be, this is home. And then that senior year, I missed my college graduation because of college baseball. And so we were going to go to Mississippi State for our regional the same weekend as commencement. And so we went to Starkville, and at Fullerton, all we ever drew was girlfriends, parents, and scouts. We were top 5 in the country, but just, nobody was coming to the games. It was right down the road from the Angels, 10 minutes down the freeway. And so we go to Starkville, and they were so unbelievably kind and nice. And they go, now here's the thing, school's out, the students are gone. So we might only get about 8,000 tomorrow night. Like,
Yeah.
I think we had 800 for our total attendance for the year.
Yeah.
You're apologizing for 8,000. It was such a memorable weekend. And then our guy, Mike Ross, hits a walk-off homer in the bottom of the ninth. And we beat A&M to go to Omaha. And I had no regrets that I skipped commencement. I was like,
that's worth it.
Then I was able to get on at University of Houston right from Fullerton.
And who would have thought you're this probably wide-eyed kid back then, right? And then fast forward a couple decades later, you're in charge of all of comms and TCU's competing for national championships on the grandest stage and in college football. I mean, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I was so appreciative of that 2022 season. I always said I was a guy from Wofford. My first year, my very first football game at Wofford, my first game as a full-time professional in the field. This shows you how long ago it was. The Ditto machine broke in the press box. One thing I always would say is, 16 years Wofford, 20 years TCU. So 36 years full time, not counting the internship year at Houston. And I changed jobs one time in 36 years. And I went from Division II to the Big 12 by changing a job just one time, because Wofford went, D2 to D1, and then TCU from Mountain West to Big 12. But I remember standing on the sidelines pregame, the CFP semifinal year or game when we beat Michigan, and then again in the championship game against Georgia in LA, just standing on the sidelines pregame, just like, my God, I've come a long way from the Ditto machine breaking on me in 1989 to where I am now. That's why I always have a special place in my heart for small schools, small colleges, because I was a D2 guy, basically, until life took me to where I was ultimately at the national championship game.
What did you like the most about working in that space? And then talk about things that you didn't really like.
Well, number one, hands down, not even close, is the relationships with student athletes.
Mm-hmm.
That was the one thing always took pride in. And it didn't matter to me. And I think the guys will tell you, whether you were a All-American first-round draft pick or if you were a walk-on, it didn't matter. Everybody, was like a son to me on those teams. And Max Duggan, the 2022 season, and he's runner-up for the Heisman, wins the Davey O'Brien, the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award, the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award, coordinating everything with his schedule. We built such a relationship that, he is like my honorary fourth son.
Yeah.
And his family means the world to me. The guys, they invite you to their weddings. You get the LinkedIn invites, you get the Facebook friend requests, every little thing. Been going to lunch, ever since I departed TCU. I mean, just the lunches, getting together with everybody, just the relationship with student athletes. They knew I had their back, and it wasn't just media stuff.
Right.
It was recommendation letters, helping them get jobs, putting them in contact with people, protecting them. If there was something even off the field, helping keep it out of the newspapers, out of the media. The one thing I think the guys will tell you is I had their back, and it was beyond just the media, just that relationships. Ty Gunn was my first quarterback at TCU 20 years ago. We're going to get together for lunch sometime this week, keeping in touch with all those guys. And the same thing goes with all the Wofford guys. I've been gone from Wofford for 20 years, and it was last year about 7 to 8 of my former Wofford football players from the early 90s came out to a TCU game. they just, we kept in touch even when I got to Fort Worth. And so all my Wofford guys came out, to the game, going out to eat with them. Even the Wofford baseball team I worked with my first year in 1989, I keep in touch with all those guys. They had a 30-year reunion that I get invited to, the most successful season in Wofford baseball history. And I'm thinking, wow, they're inviting the SID from their team. That was like 30 some years ago. There's no doubt. I mean, it's just the relationships with the student athletes and a lot of athletic staff, student interns through the years. I mean, so many student interns that I worked with, when I left, I mean, I got so overwhelmed. I mean, all the notes and texts, emails, phone calls I got, from the student interns, that thanked me because, I was influential in their career, helping them get jobs, placing them with the right people. That was always just number one on the list.
Yeah, it's really fun to be around those kids at that age. You watch them grow from like boys or little girls to men and women. I mean, they leave there, they're 22, 23, they're ready to take on the world, and you played a little part in you're not a big part, but you played a little part in helping them to get to where they are. And it really is a big perk about working in that position.
Nowadays, like, you see them and they got their own families. It was really cool last spring and in the fall of this past year. There was a quarterback at TCU, Hoss Haney. His dad, my first year at TCU, was a senior D lineman. And I was like, wow, my first father-son duo. And even Andy Dalton, who, I have a very strong relationship with. You see interviews with some athletes now, even when they're done playing, and you see a little gray hair and a beard. Like, Mike, he's got gray hair now?
As we all get older, Andy and I each both worked in the business for over 20 years until recently. And, while you're in the grind, a lot of it's a blur, but maybe you're not thinking as much about the big picture of life and the things that are happening and the relationships that you build. And as I got older, it didn't matter about the accolades and the headlines and the awards and all of those things. It was truly the relationships that you build in the trenches with people that can't really be replicated in many jobs that you do.
I remember when the greatest way to leave a school was when I was leaving Wofford to come to TCU. The team had just started fall camp. And so I had a little media talk to the team, like just about every school has their SID speak. And so I gave the spiel and I said, by the way, guys, I know some of you might be aware, this is actually my last day. I'm on a flight to Fort Worth, Texas tomorrow. And I start work at TCU, but just wanted to say, I appreciate all of you. I'll always be available. Feel free to holler anytime. I'll never forget, Eric Hutchinson was a Wofford DN, number 53 from Woodbine, Georgia. And he just stood up in the front row and applauded. And then the whole Wofford team stood up and applauded. And I waved, and I walked out. My oldest son, David, who went into the family business, he works at Cincinnati in communications. He was with me. I remember putting my arm around him as I walked out. I'm like, man, that's the way to go. Your student athletes give you a standing ovation on the way out.
It's like a scene out of Hoosiers. It's like a slow clap.
So that's one thing that's going to continue on. Will always be the relationships, and the guys know, I'm always there for them.
So, Mark, talk about, like, when you're in the position, did you have any non-negotiables? Like, are there one or two qualities that you wouldn't compromise on when you worked with people you interacted with?
My job was always to protect the student athletes and protect the coaches. The media would tell you I was the most accommodating guy in the world. But number one was, if a student athlete didn't want to talk about a certain subject, I would make sure that was well known. If there was an interesting aspect to their personal life, and most times people are okay sharing things, but as you guys know, I'm not going to share anything if the student athlete about their personal life, if they don't give me a thumbs up on it.
Right.
So I would, always check with them, but there were a few things here and there, that student athletes and media knew about it, but I would say, we're not going to talk about that. I would, the art of PR, you perfect apologizing. You take the bullets, for your players, you take the bullets for your coaches. when Gary Patterson was the head coach for, I guess that would be 16 and a half years that I worked with him, he just didn't like a lot of media coverage or media access. The availability was very limited, so that was my job, was keeping goodwill with all the media when many times I'm the one who said no to them. And I was just protecting the interests of the program, following the wishes of the coach. And that was my job, was to keep goodwill with the media when you often had to say no to them, and then find them alternative solutions, find them different ways to assist them in doing their job. But first and foremost, you protect your program. Even with Max Duggan, the 22 season with the Heisman and CFP deal, it was unbelievable the amount of media requests, and you're not going to do them all. So that's where with Max, he entrusted everything into me, and I would set the schedule of, okay, when practice ends, we're going to do 3 media outlets, boom, boom, boom. And if you want him, you're going to be at 11:30, you're going to be at 11:45, and you're going to be at noon.
Right.
And I would go back and forth. And because when Max, we finished practice in the morning, the team would eat in the facility. And then when they walked out of the facility, they have classes, social life, they're done. I mean, I'm not going to bother them when they walk out of the facility. And so when he would leave the facility, all his media for the day was done. And if you're a Seinfeld person, that episode with George Costanza, when he's breaking up with the girl, who's got hand? I've got hand. It felt like you had some hand with ESPN and others, because if you want Max Duggan on your Fox show or ESPN show, we've got a slot available for you at 12. Now, you told us you want him at 2:15.
Take it or leave it.
You get him at 12.
That's
now,
right.
if you're 5 and 7, you take whatever you can get.
Yeah.
But and ESPN would accommodate. They wanted Max Duggan, and I told them you can have him at 12. He's got something at 11:30, something at 11:45, and we just kind of set aside as Tuesday is his media day, Wednesday only if it's like an influencer, somebody major, and then that's it. And there were some major people we had to just not be able to. I mean, you can't have him on the phone for 10 hours a day just talking to people.
Barca, I think you don't he's speaking my language here, although I didn't really probably see as many as he's seen. When you're good, people want to talk to you all the time, and it's constant. I don't know how many requests you were probably getting a day. I mean, for me, like maybe getting 8 to 10 a day during, we make the basketball tournament, but I'm sure you're getting 80 to 100 a day, and just to go through everything, it's a grind, dude, isn't it? It's such a grind. It's fun, but it's a grind.
The 22 season, it was just an unbelievable experience. I always sum it up, and others, in the field can relate when they've had great seasons. This happens to other schools as well. When you're on the phone with Lee Corso and you see Desmond Howard's name pop up, and I'm like, oh God, I can't have Desmond Howard go to voicemail.
That's right.
But I can't tell Lee Corso, hey, can you hold on for a minute?
Yeah.
Those are the pleasant problems that you had.
Yeah. Or it's one of those things where I think I may have mentioned this before on the pod. It's like, okay, so you're in the middle of it, and then the next year someone asks you, so how did it go? And you're like, I don't really remember. I just made it through, and at the end, I collapsed. And you're probably in the same boat. It's just one of those things that you don't have any words for it, because you can't, it's happened so fast, and there's so much that you just don't remember.
I was advised by some people, I trust, just during that 22 season, you just got to relax and just soak it in, and I remember being on the sidelines, whether it was the CFP semifinal, the locker room after we beat Michigan, or pregame against Georgia in the championship. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm just like, my God, I'm just a guy from Wofford. I mean, I'm just a guy who I just appreciate it, because I kept thinking, how many people are in this field? NAIA, Division III, Division II, FCS, the schools that don't have football. How many people would love to trade spots with me right now? What a dream scenario and situation that I'm in. I never took it for granted. This is pretty cool. When we beat Michigan, I remember the next day we're flying back home, and just looking at my phone, it was just nonstop. And I told my wife, I said, you know what? I could work 24/7. I could go literally without sleep for a week, and I'm not going to be able to get caught up. And so, I would just stay up every night till like 11 or 11:30, and I would just say, that's it. At 11 o'clock, I'm home. I'm just returning emails, getting back to people. But at 11, I'm done. I got to get my sleep. I can't just, and it was tiring. I mean, it was an exhausting season. Max Duggan won the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award. That was the last of the awards. And so the event was in Tyler, Texas, which is 2 hours away from Fort Worth. They do a tremendous job with it. They bring in the finalists every year, and then they announce the winner. You don't know in advance. They bring in the finalists. And I hope Cindy Smoke, who runs the award, doesn't get mad for me sharing this. But, we were going to get it back we played Monday night, and we're flying back from LA the next day. And we weren't going to get back to campus till I think it was early evening. We got back from LA the next day. And I said, Cindy, look, it's been a long grind. We played 15 games. It's January 9. The event's January 11. Even with Max, going to New York for the Heisman, Baltimore for the Unitas. We got Davey O'Brien coming up in February. We have a great relationship with the award. I got to know. I won't tell anybody. Is he winning the award? If he's winning the award, we will be there. I just can't have him. Right. We get back from LA, and all of a sudden the very next day drive again 2 hours, to Tyler. I can't ask that of him. He's done everything. And she gave me a confidential heads up. Yes, he's winning. So okay.
Good for her.
And Max understood.
Sponsored by.
We'd like to thank our loyal sponsors of No Longer Credentialed. Without them, we wouldn't be able to sell out to corporate in the most pathetic way possible. Today's episode is brought to you by the 4-Minute Exit Meeting, the official HR partner of We Really Appreciated Your Service, but we're going to need you to hand over your badge immediately. So apparently you worked at this place for 7 years, then one day they go, hey man, can you step into this room real quick? And just like that, they take everything, even the random keys you didn't know you still had. And while they're letting you go, someone's in the back resetting your passwords and scrubbing your existence off the server like you're a fugitive. They were even kind enough to clean out your office without telling you. Then they slide over a severance packet and say it's a great deal. Just sign here so no one has to hear from your lawyer. The 4-Minute Exit Meeting, helping you transition from valued team member to please don't make a scene in record time. The 4-Minute Exit Meeting will fire your ass faster than Jason Biggs to filing a dessert in 1999. We'd also like to thank OnlyFans Sports Edition, the side hustle for overworked, underpaid content professionals who are somehow both vital and disposable. You're running the team TikTok, and you're surviving off Ruby Tuesday sampler platters, paycheck to paycheck. Why keep giving away elite content for free when you can sell access to the lifestyle? We've got slow-mo tunnel walks that linger just a little too long on the quarterback's jawline. How about ankle taping footage from the training room, filmed like a French art house short by a grad assistant whose shirt is inexplicably wet? Whispered ASMR readings of post-game quotes like, "We didn't just execute." Or you crying over a corrupted Premiere file in candlelight. OnlyFans Sports Edition. Sure, everyone's going to be wondering how you're driving around a G-Wagon on a coordinator's salary. Let them.
Podcast. You get it.
All of these things you're saying about the job, obviously the three of us sort of come from a different generation of working in sports and have seen it just expand and grow so much, and it's continuing to evolve, especially the last 15 years is with the internet and everything, social media and paying players. I don't think people quite understand the art of what you do and the ability to build relationships with media. And, I don't see it as much anymore, at least in my own experiences when dealing with communications offices. A lot of times departments are focused more on what they're putting out themselves instead of the art of the pitch and building these relationships. And I really feel like it's sort of maybe a dying breed. And it's sad to see that because I really do feel like SIDs and communication specialists are very underappreciated and undervalued with what they do for a department.
No, I appreciate that thought. The relationships with media are the exact same. You get back to everybody. I know it sounds like a cliche, but it doesn't matter if it's the student radio station in Winnemucca, Nevada, or if it's, Nicole Auerbach and Chris Budden for their Sirius XM show. You get back to everybody. And it's just, you treat everybody with respect. At Wofford, we were D2 for the longest time. Then we went D1. And the TV market, Greenville-Spartanburg, is the number 35 market in the country. People don't realize 35 is pretty good. And the local media, the TVs told me they covered us more than they probably should have when we were D2. But they just like coming over the way that we treated them. And even during the CFP season, you thank those media for coming to your campus.
You do.
You got the Cowboys, the Rangers, the Mavericks, the Stars. You got, WNBA, you got everything in this market. And even during the CFP season, they don't have to come. That's why you always make sure you thank them for being there. That CFP season, the Rangers and Cowboys would having media availabilities, and they were scheduling it around us because they knew that's where the media were going, that we were the hot topic.
That was nice.
Yeah, they don't want to compete because they knew where the media were going. The Rangers were signing Nathan Eovaldi, pretty big signee in Major League Baseball, but they scheduled their Nathan Eovaldi presser around TCU footballs that year. And I would consult with them, if we do something media wise, what day is good for you? These weekly pressers, is this the right day? Is this the right time? The national media, that was one thing. Yeah, I made sure whenever they came to TCU, nobody treated them better. That's why when I left, all the the comments on social media, it was unbelievable. I was overwhelmed. The national media and others. Sonny Cumbie, who's the head football coach at Louisiana Tech, he was offensive coordinator at TCU for 5, 6, 7 years. Became a great friend. And Sonny called me after my departure was out. And Sonny, he said, "Man, I'm just glad that you get to see the impact you had on people.
That's awesome.
The love that you're getting on social media, whether it's Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook.
Right.
He goes, I'm glad you get to see it. Normally that happens when you die,
Right.
but this time at least you're around to see, the impact you had on people." And, I thought, wow, I appreciate that.
I didn't know you personally. My feed was flooded with you that entire day, and I pulled up the Reese Davis tweet. Few have ever championed their program the way Mark did. He was excellent at his job, professional at all times. His position might have been eliminated, but replacing him will be a Herculean, if not impossible. Good luck, Mark, a pro's pro. Obviously a difficult day, but like you said, a lot of times you don't hear that stuff until a funeral. So it had to have been bittersweet.
Yeah, that meant the world to me. When I'm still trying to get back to everybody. I had probably 300 texts that just came in. It was just unbelievable, and still I'm getting phone calls from people just that I've worked with through the years. I mentioned so many students, that you mentored through the years, that you helped them get their first job. The student interns that become moms, they send you the baby pics. I remember some of those student interns, they would tell me they got that job that I helped them with. I go, great, man, your parents must be excited. And they'd be like, well, I'm going to call my mom next. Why am I before your mom and dad? And they go, no, I just want to thank you so much for helping me with this. Several times in town, I didn't have to buy my meal. I'd be sitting somewhere and somebody took care of the check. I was at a local barbecue place having a couple beers, and next thing I know, hey, your bill's been covered. And somebody just goes, hey, thank you for everything. So, it's just been phenomenal. The support, from everybody, trustees from TCU reaching out to me. I feel truly blessed to have met some of the greatest people. I wish I was still getting ready for a football season, but that's the way life goes. I've got a new grandson.
Oh, congratulations.
Eli.
That's awesome.
Thanks. He's 3 months old now. And that's number one in my life is my grandson. I've been enjoying some travel, the last couple months, a lot of free time. It's been nice to kind of reboot, refresh. I think I'm cramping my wife's style. She's not used to having me home so much. My dog loves it. Lots of walks, morning walks, afternoon walks. I think I've lost 10, 15 pounds because, more time for walk and exercise, but it's been great. I got some trips planned to Utah coming up, just really enjoying the break.
I just wanted to get your take on when it happened, and when you're walking out of the AD's office, what's your initial thoughts, feelings, that type of thing? I mean, it's just, to me, when it happened to me, it was just kind of all just the wide range of emotions, and continued that way for I don't know how long, but it seems like you're adjusting pretty well. But I just kind of wanted to get your, what was your thoughts when it went down?
I've been working with the new AD the 2-3 months that he'd been on board, writing his newsletters, helping with statements, media requests, setting up media roundtable. I thought it was going really well. And then I was going to have my first and only one-on-one meeting with him. Our offices were across the hall from each other. The calendar invite came in on a Saturday, for a meeting on Tuesday afternoon. Okay, my first one-on-one meeting, even though we've been working together. It lasted all of about 4 minutes. It basically just said there wasn't a spot for you anymore. And actually, what happened was right before that, I got notified the meeting wouldn't be in his office. It would be in the conference room, and an HR guy was going to be in there joining us. And I was like, well, that's probably not trending in the right direction. And so, the meeting went about 4 minutes, told there wasn't a spot for me anymore. And then the HR guy just took over the meeting. And, I drove home and I'm like, well, you know what? I gave my all. That's all you can do. I gave my best. I came home, what's funny is it's supposed to be a confidential meeting. I'm home for like an hour and my phone starts blowing up from people that, hey, I heard about what happened. I'm like, how did you hear about what happened?
Yeah.
Was it on the ticker or something? I go, literally, I just got out of the meeting.
Yeah.
And people are already calling me. I just look at it as I've got a grandson in Cincinnati. When you talk about what's important in life, it's my son's growing family, spending more time at home. I've got 2 special needs sons. The 2 sons at home, both are on the autism spectrum. One is on the severe end. He's 30 years old. He's nonverbal. My youngest son is high functioning on the autism spectrum. He works part-time at Albertsons, the local grocery store. So those 2 young men, they're not boys anymore. One's 30, one's 26. They're going to be with my wife and I as long as we're around. So I looked at it as, what? More time with family, and especially with, a grandson in Cincinnati. And that's what means the most to me. It made you appreciate family even more. And, so many people reached out, ADs from other schools that I know that I'd worked with, administrators from other schools, even coaches that I'd worked with and crossed paths, that this had happened to them in their careers. And they all told me, just relax, just take your time. Don't rush into anything. Take a break. You've earned it. And that was the best advice. And that's what I would give to anybody. I mean, the last couple of months, I've just been, really enjoying the time off. Yeah, it was kind of a shock. You could say that. The last thing, you're told it's not performance-based. You've been getting maximum merit raises every year. So obviously you must have been doing something right. I'm just ready to move on, and we'll see what's next.
It's happened to me as well. And you get that HR invite and some red flags start popping up. Not much explanation on what's actually happening.
Yeah.
And when you get the news, it's so cold and quick. Feel like your world stopped just because of the shock. But then there's also this weird sense of, well, now I don't have that never ending to-do list that I never finished weight off of my shoulders. It's hard to explain, because you go through the gamut of emotions of, man, I poured out my soul to this place for 15 years or 20 years or for however long. And sometimes it's just a very cold, bitter end. And it's a tough pill to swallow because you run through all the emotions, being upset. What am I going to do next? Also, I'm relieved, right? Like maybe I'm sort of getting my life back.
For the last 36 years, 37, including my internship year, I only know 7 days a week in the fall, from August 1 until December/January, 7 days a week. So, wow. So on Sunday, I can just watch NFL football now. I can go to brunch and have some mimosas on a Sunday morning, not have to worry about working in the afternoon. So there'll be some things that'll be different. But, with the free time I have, my middle son, who's on the severe end of the spectrum, he goes to a day program where they teach him life skills. And so I pick him up now, and you pick him up and he's got a big smile on his face walking out. I get to take my son to work more. He doesn't drive, so you just do little things like that. So I've kept busy. I mean, there's little projects here and there. Different schools have reached out, some consulting, here and there to, help them, mentor some of their younger staff. I stay busy here and there. We'll see what's next. But for now, I get my daily photos and videos of my grandson, and it just puts a smile on your face.
So
I mean,
great.
that's what matters most, and pretty confident they'll have some more family expansion down the road. And so, that's what means most.
So I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about the business. I left in 2020, and I just kind of wanted to get your take on what's the main difference between 2025 and 2020?
I think the demand, with social media, coaches want content, year round. And obviously you have the challenge of the off seasons producing that content. People need to work smartly now, just little things, like recaps of games. Nobody's reading 20 paragraphs. You got to work smart and efficiently, even with football, the old recap. Now, football is a little different because everybody has watched the game. They know what happened. And it didn't matter if it was a CFP season or a 5-7 season. The football recap is going to be 5 paragraphs. I can knock it out in 12 minutes. There's no reason to spend an incredible amount of time with some eloquent written recap of a game that people aren't going to the website to look at. So much of it now is promoting the stories, and it doesn't matter if it's football or equestrian or rifle or triathlon. It could be any Olympic sport. Media want the human interest stories. They want access. You can have the running back that has 5 straight 100-yard games, but what is there about him that makes him interesting that we need to, convince local TV to do a story on him, or national TV, game day or big noon kickoff? You need to have a hook, and you need to provide access.
Right.
Like you see it when you watch the games now, player interviews at halftime. It's just adapting, to where there's the expectation now that you're going to be an open, accessible program. And a lot of it also, is fueled through the demand for social media content, promoting your players, with NIL. You want to show everybody you're doing the best you can to, get them out there. And obviously now you have the revenue sharing. I think the biggest change, is just how people consume their information. Websites, people go to websites for stats, a schedule, and a roster.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going there to read
No.
game previews or read recaps. Just like with media notes, one of the staples of the trade, it didn't matter if we were in the CFP game or not, or in a 5-7 season, my notes are going to be the same number of pages, concise. And that's what the TV people said, is they don't have to search through 89 pages of information. Right. Just get them the relevant information, tell them about the storylines, the human interest stories, what makes each guy tick. I love Joe Tessitore. He's the absolute best in preparation. We would have those Monday night calls when he had our game, and we'd be on the phone for 3 hours because we would go through every player on the depth chart, everything about them. And I would say, okay, now this guy at receiver, he's a walk-on, but, he's been playing a little bit. He's gotten some snaps here and there. And then Joe would say, well, there's a chance he's going to be on the field. Tell me about him. I want to know everything about him. And so I would say, hey, he's got an Instagram page, where he's a food critic in Fort Worth. I mean, just, little details like that. And that's where I valued that relationship with the guys, where you weren't just the guy who went up to them for media interviews. Okay, every time Mark comes near me, okay, it's a media interview. They knew when I would talk about, how's their day going? How's classes? If they're from San Antonio, hey, are you a Spurs fan? I mean, just, building the relationship, the rapport with them, that it wasn't just, I'm only the media guy. They knew I was somebody that was in their corner, but still a lost art in this field now.
Huge.
Again, goes back to the relationships, the personal touch with people. Don't just send the TV crew, hey, here's our game notes. We'll see you Saturday. Reaching out to them during the week, making sure they have everything they need, the backstories, the sideline reporters, the local media. You can never forget the local media. Some people get caught up. If you're having a great year, they get caught up in the hype of the national media descending upon you. But my God, it's the local media when you're 5-7, or if you're 9-22 in basketball, the local media are the ones who are always going to be there. And so you always have to take care of them because they're there, whether it's a great year or not.
What do you make of what's going on right now in college sports? I mean, we've got the House settlement that just went into effect, that just got approved July 1st. We've got places like Power 4 schools like the Michigans and the Arkansas and Texas A&M, and you got Kansas, and the list goes on and on and on of places that are now having to really look at their budget with this $20 million hit. We're seeing staff cuts 5 to 10%. And it's a really scary time for people and uncertain time for people that do the jobs that we did in sports. And what do you make of all of this right now? And what do you tell somebody that's getting into the industry right now? It's just completely different.
It's different. And that revenue share, that number is just going to go up every year. And so this is just the beginning. I mean, the revenue allotment will be higher next year and the year after. And, it's a tough time in the field. I mean, I would always tell people that wanted to get into it, it's a lifestyle. When you do it, it's not a 9-to-5 job. I mean, you do it because you have a passion for athletics. So many students I met with on campus, that wanted to go into athletics, I would not try to scare them. I would just give them the realities of it. One thing about this field, and you work on a college campus, you look at, like you go to a Thursday night soccer game or a Sunday afternoon baseball game. Like you have no specific job duties there, but you go there and you're still representing your school. You're on the clock, even though you don't have a specific job function, you're still on the clock because people see you there as an administrator. Fans see you there. They want to talk to you. Donors see you there. You're still on the clock, even though you don't have a specific job function, but you go there just for the enjoyment, because you are friends with the coaches from that sport. Some student athletes. And I always tell the students or those who want to get in the field, say nothing against Frost Bank, State Farm Insurance, or, one of those companies, but you don't just go to your place of employment to hang out on Thursday nights or to hang out on Sunday afternoons. But you do that when you work in collegiate athletics because they're your coworkers, they're your friends, you want to support them. Would tell the students, you don't do it because you want to get rich. You do it because you have a passion for it. And then, you're not going to get that full-time job when you graduate. You're going to be that GA for a year or two or that intern.
I got a question for you about passion. And for me, the way that I was kind of let go of my job, I kind of felt like the people who'd made the decision took advantage of my passion. And I just kind of wanted to get your feel on that. Like, just want to get your take, because that was a feeling that I had this passion for this position, and it was great. I loved everything about it most of the time, but then they'll just cut you loose, in 30 seconds or 4 minutes or whatever. So I just kind of wanted to see if you had those feelings at all.
Looking back on it, like I mentioned, my first and only one-on-one, was my termination meeting. It would have been nice. You had a chance to maybe, I don't want to say defend yourself,
Right.
but at least, get to know you better and the impact that you've had on so many people. And again, you're told this is not performance-based, and again, I was getting maximum merit raises every year.
Right.
You gave your all to a place, and within 4 minutes, it was over,
gone.
Just like that, but when I drove home, tell my wife, the first thing I had to do was pick up the dry cleaning. I had dry cleaning to pick up, and I had another errand to run. And so I finally got home, and I just gave her the news, and I said, you know what? That's life,
Right. It is.
And the thing is, with my grandson being born in April, that's
Perfect,
number one on
right? Kind of perfect
You told
timing.
me, would you take grandson or keeping your job at TCU? I'm taking the grandson.
Right.
Look at my grandson every day and smile. I forget where the guy worked at, but there was a tweet from somebody in sports I didn't know him personally, but he said, I've never seen such national outrage over a college guy losing his job. I go, I don't know. He goes, I don't know this guy, but he must be pretty good at what he
That's
does.
awesome. Yeah,
Um,
it's I don't know. I just the house thing, the house stuff, and just everybody just getting cut left and right, and
I mean, look at Kevin Trainor at Arkansas.
unbelievable,
I mean, his whole
unbelievable.
family is Razorbacks.
Yeah, he's been there for
I mean, that is
forever.
a true Arkansas Razorback guy. I was at TCU 20 years. He was at Arkansas 30. You know, he's got deep family ties with the university. He's the national president of college sports
I
communicators.
know. It's
Um,
wild, man. I
You know, John Bianco at Texas.
Yes.
You know, John is a really good friend. John's a legend in the field, one of the best people. A new AD came into Texas and John got let go.
Mhm.
And then the new AD wound up getting let go himself. And then they brought John back.
Yeah.
I remember that same outrage of how'd they get rid of John Bianco? TCU was a big part of my family. You know, my sons were getting speech therapy on campus. I think my family was a fixture on campus. You know, everybody knew them. You know, my wife in the stands, you know, she'd go out to the grocery store and people just knew her. So many people know my son from the grocery store. I mean, players at TCU would come up to me the next morning. Your son bagged my groceries.
awesome.
You know, they're all excited that my son bagged
Yeah,
their groceries.
That's awesome.
But I still keep in touch with a lot of the TCU players. You know, they buzz me periodically on something,
That
and
really helps.
and I'm just enjoying getting together with all the former players.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, again, it goes back to the Wofford days. Man, I've been gone from Wofford for 20 years, and those guys, I still talk to them as much as I talk to the TCU guys.
You know, we work all these hours and, we sacrifice family and things like that. And then at the drop of a dime, it's over, So then you have to kind of reconcile all those feelings like, well, I've never been let go in my life and now I'm in this position. And so I don't know. We've had fun. We just talk about stuff that in the business, maybe we're kind of too business centric, but I think we've staked ourselves on a corner where we're going to stand up for people. We're here for you're not alone having these feelings of working in sports and then feeling like shit when you get let go. And so I don't know, Barca, I'm just kind of filling them in on the pod a little bit.
Just obviously to trade stories just about working in sports, the highs, the lows. And, what we've come to find over the last 3 months since we launched is so many people just have really tough stories about burnout in the industry. And our last episode was on that with Dr. Matt Hummel from the University of Cincinnati,
A Cincinnati professor.
who's
Okay.
He's
done
great.
extensive research with him and his colleagues about burnout in sports and surveyed over 4,500 people that worked from Power Fives at the time to D3. And they're just doing tremendous work to really bring a light on the work culture. And maybe it is time for a change. And so trying to bring some light to that. And obviously there's a lot of great things about working in sports as well, but there's still a lot that can be improved on. And while administrations have really focused on the winning side of thing, obviously the team side of thing, and because it directly impacts their own job, right? What we do feel like's been neglected is the work culture for the staff of all of these other departments that are making a lot of sacrifices for not only their families and friends and a lot of milestones that we've all missed. And so it's definitely a lifestyle business, and we all know that, having worked decades in it. But at some point, it's got to come to a head and be like, you know what? Family's important also, and maybe some things around here do need to start changing. So anyway, I can get on my my rant about it, but a lot of it's about that. It's like there's got to be a middle ground.
Yeah, and that's why I just look at it as a chance for a reboot. If I stay in collegiate athletics, great. That'd be terrific. If not, I'm perfectly content. Opportunity to do something else. Family side of things, as I get older, I got 2 young men that are going to be with my wife and I living in the house with us with special needs. With the growing family up in Cincinnati with my son, it gives you a chance to kind of reflect back and say, you know what, if something is not in athletics, that's fine. A little work-life balance, and sometimes you start looking at these different jobs, that are in the corporate world, and you're like, God, they pay a lot.
They pay a lot, dude.
Well, you think you're well taken care of, to some degree, But then son of a gun, you look at the private sector and you're like, boy,
They pay a lot
they pay pretty darn well.
and you work a
And
lot less.
you're not working 7 days a
No.
week. Um,
No. You get summer Fridays most of the time. 2:00, you're out. And you turn
Yeah,
your
and-
computer off and you don't turn it back on until Monday.
So we'll see. I mean, for now, I'm just really enjoying a nice break, have lunch with some, people, friends. And then, you know what? Let's go grab a beer at the brewery.
Yeah.
And so you sit at a brewery, having a beer at 2:00 on a Thursday, and you're like, this is better than maybe being in a meeting,
Yeah.
a little more relaxing and chill. But,
Yeah.
I took the advice of so many people that have been in my situation of just take your time,
Good
just
for you.
enjoy the break. And that's what I'm doing. And then, we'll see down the road, whether it's in the fall or winter, whatever comes up next.
Right.
But for now, might tag along with my wife on more Costco trips.
There you go.
Time to wrap it up.
And that's another edition of No Longer Credentialed. Thanks to all of you listening. And if you like it, tell a friend and give it a 5-star rating on your podcast app of choice. Don't forget to check us out on social media at NLC Pod on X, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. Until next week, keep grinding.
And Jason Phillips, the great linebacker for us, played in the NFL with the Ravens, came back to coach. Jason raises his hand and he goes, "Hey, weren't you on Stump the Schwab once? What happened on that?"
All right, I have to bring this up before we get out of here, and you know where I'm going to go. The Cheez-It Bowl. I got to ask you about that. Can you walk us through exactly what happened?
Bottom line is we've never lost a game when that happened.
There you go.
And, the interception takes place and they're running it back like 60 some yards. I can't see, so I just happened to, I guess I stepped on the field like 1 step or 2 steps too far and got trucked by the ref. Yeah, they threw the flag and
There you go.
That one was
Are you
very
in the game? Are you in the game book?
I don't know. I went up to Gary Patterson afterwards and thankfully we won. I just said, sorry, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
he just kind of never really said anything. He just kind of shook his head and that was about it. But, good thing we won.
Yeah.